Okay, so today we're gonna make the pre-ferment for the Calgary sourdough recipe. Okay, Jimmy Kimmel's gonna help us out here. My sourdough starter is nice and ripe. You can see here the carbon dioxide, and this one was with the stone ground whole wheat. So I need 60 grams of this. I've got 377 grams of liquid here, nice and cold water, and I think it's 307 grams of bread flour. So I'm just going to mix all these things together and let it ferment overnight for between 12 and 16 hours. I'm going to go 12 hours on this, or well, maybe I'll go 16. I want to sleep in tomorrow. So I'm just going to mix these things together and we'll go from there, and we'll see the results in the morning. Okay, so the next morning you can see that our pre-ferment has come up. It's not quite as high as I would like it, so possibly I could leave it for a few more hours, but there is some nice fermentation, and there's fissures on the top where you can see it's risen up, so I think it's at a good spot right now. I also did spray the pan, the bowl last night, so I think it came up, and it's doing good. So we're gonna do an autolyse with the levain. Okay, so we're just gonna mix the water, the levain, and all the flour. I did make, if you do make this recipe at home, you can just hand mix. So there is no friction factor, so my water is quite warm. It's about 34 degrees Celsius. I do wanna get this mixed together basically to short. It's gonna take a few minutes, but I would suggest at home, do a recipe that's maybe 2 loaves, because this is gonna be a little bit challenging. You can see the amount of flour I have there to mix by hand. So, and I'm running out of bowls too. I don't have very many bowls that are big enough. So I'm gonna do my mix inside the KitchenAid mixer just in case if I can't mix it all by hand. So with my pre-ferments, this one's fairly liquid too. So usually it's about a little bit of water on top will just help release it. And I think I'll mix into here to start. So I don't have to use a KitchenAid. I'd like to do it all by hand. Trying to go back to the traditional bread making methods here. Primitive bread making. Okay, so I'm gonna get this all mixed together. We'll come back in a few minutes just to show you what the dough looks like when it's done. Okay, so I mixed the dough. I managed to do it just all in the large bowl. And then once the dough starts coming together and your hands are really sticky, usually what I do is just clean up my hands, just rub all that excess product off, and then just take the dough, clean up my hands quite well, take the dough, put it on the, lucky I have like the nice quartz countertop so it doesn't stick, it's nice and cold. Then I do my finishing on here, then that way I don't have a lot of the dough sticking to my hands. Once I'm done now, I need to autolyse. So we're gonna add salt in later on. I'm gonna give this about an hour autolyse. I wanna do as long as fermentation as possible on everything today. So I'm gonna give it about an hour autolyse. Usually autolyse, you don't add yeast at the beginning, or this way in this recipe we've added a wild yeast too. So it can be done that way as well, or with your pre-ferments too. So we're gonna come back in about 60 minutes and we're gonna add the salt into this dough. So we've given the dough the autolyse now, so you can see even the enzyme action here, how much more extensible this dough, it's not as tight. What I'm gonna do now is incorporate the salt into here, and then we're gonna start the bulk fermentation. I forgot to mention the dough temp on here was 24 degrees Celsius, so calculating 0 friction factor, because I mixed it by hand, I did get my 24 degrees Celsius today, so that was good. So I'm gonna get the salt mixed in there, and then we're gonna go into bulk fermentation. And recipe calls for 2.5 hours with a fold at 1.25 hours, but I might go 3 hours depending on how the dough is looking. So I want it to be active and double inside. So I'll show you when we do the first fold. So now we've done our first bulk fermentation. That was an hour and a half. You can see there's some life to this dough, but just gonna punch it down, redistribute the temperature and the yeast, and then we'll come back in another hour and a half. I'm gonna go really long fermentation on this guy. Okay, so we're done our bulk fermentation now. So I'm just gonna take out the dough, get it onto the table, and just do a divide and free shape. Okay, so these are fairly big loaves, 800 grams. And so you can see there I've got 812, pretty close. Take a little bit off. See that one? 36, just a little big, it's okay. Almost smells a little bit sour. Probably more than likely that's the last loaf there. Looks pretty good. Just gonna take a little bit of that off and put it onto these guys. Okay, so you can see I did very minimal cuts on my dough, just because of the way I pre-shaped it. Keep that surface tension on the bottom, and then we're just going to roll these guys up for a couple of them. A couple I'm going to do in oval shape. Just pop them over here, and then I'm going to round a couple too. So this just degasses the dough, relaxes it, and helps build your final shape. This dough is only about 65% hydration, so it's pretty tight. It feels good. Put it over there. Like there's this one I'd like to mess with the hydration a little bit. I actually think I would go a little bit higher on the hydration next time I make it. Okay, so we'll come back in about 20 minutes and do our final shape. So we're just going to do our final shape. We've got some rusting done here, so just going to degas a little bit. You can see this dough's pretty slow with that wild yeast, but you can still see some fermentation happening. We're going to do cold fermentation overnight. I'm going to evaluate what these look like in the morning, but I still might proof them a little bit longer tomorrow. If I was to do my final proof now, I'd probably give it 3 to 4 hours at room temp. I'm going to put these into bannetons, so just have a look at the bottom there. Like I said, the dough's a little dry, so I'm just going to seal that guy up, and I'm going to put it right into some flour here. And I can either go into linen lined, couche lined banneton, but one thing that I found that works really good is shower caps too. So I'll give it a little bit of a pan spray so it doesn't stick, just a little tiny bit. And then I'm just going to put the bowl in here and just make sure that lots of flour on there. And then we'll just put this in the fridge overnight. So pretty simple on the round ones. Thank you, Martin Barnett, for that trick with the shower cap. And just for these guys here, I'm gonna do these ones in the linen coupe. So I've got my pre-shape, a little bit too much flour on the table right now, but I'm just gonna bring that in on the sides, and I have nice surface tension on top. And now I'm just gonna heal that. Heal that. My bannetons are pretty long, so I can do this shape. And just one last one. Okay. So surface tension is, this dough is pretty dry. So I'm just gonna bring that back in and pinch, pinch, and pinch. Yeah, definitely next time I make this recipe, I'm gonna adjust the hydration. It's too dry. Okay, so not the nicest seam, but that's at home baking for you sometimes. Into the flour, into the couche, and then overnight we'll check these guys in the morning. So we're gonna finish up the sourdough here. So this is the shower cap idea. This has been taking a long time to proof. So I did actually, if you can see my starter here, I switched it out to bread flour, and you could see much more activity. My whole wheat, whole grain was getting up to here, and this is actually in probably right now 10 hours or 8 hours. It's already tripled in volume, so this is way more active than this guy. But that being said, I just let this go for a much longer time. Hopefully we'll get some decent results with this bread. So right now it's done a fairly good proof, but still pretty heavy. But you can see how easily that comes out of the banneton with the shower cap in there too. So that's been in the fridge too as well. But then this morning I pulled it out and let it proof at room temp. This one I'm going to get some flour on top, both of these guys, and rub this in because I want to have a little bit of a different look on these guys when I score it. And then later on I'll bake those oval loaves. And just scoring for this, again, I like to go fairly simple. So maybe just some cuts across here, here, and here, and one there. Okay, and this one I'm gonna go really deep, so it does still feel pretty tight. Scoring, there's lots of different things you can do. Sometimes I get fancy, but it's not really practical in an industrial situation. You gotta go pretty fast. And yeah, we'll get these baked and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we got some nice loaves, just came out of the oven. Like I said, with my whole wheat starter, not probably as active as using the bread flour, but it smells really good. Got a nice crust color on it, nice score, and we did get a bit of a lift on it too, so it's nice. So we still got these guys to go. This is the ones I did in the linen, and just to get these out, pretty easy as well. And again, these guys were proofing for, God, all day pretty much. Really long proof, so I'm hoping these are gonna have like a really beautiful sour flavor. That excess flour, I do just rub that a little bit. And these are just pieces of linen that I've cut. You can buy linen that's perfectly shaped for these guys too, but it's a lot more expensive. So, and I'm cheap. Okay, so I'm just gonna do some simple scoring on here too. So just across the top, nice deep score. These are tight.
You can hear Coco eating.
Yeah, dog's having dinner right now. No bread for her. This one I might try doing an S. We'll see what this one looks like, just for fun. Okay, now we'll get these in the oven and then we'll see what these are like in about probably 40 minutes. Okay, so there you have it. We got those last two loaves out of the oven. Really happy with that one, actually. It's really beautiful. That one's kind of a neat score. You can see these ones have cooled down a bit. Nice crust on them. The smell is really nice and sour. So later on, we're going to dig into those.